Welcome to Sage Talks. I'm here, my name is Angel Tessie from Experience Pros, and I'm here interviewing Dr. Luc Moens, PhD. I'm pretty excited to do this. Dr. Luc Moens has a degree in agrochemical engineering from Ghent University in Belgium and a PhD in synthetic organic chemistry from the University of California in Santa Barbara. He recently finished a 25-year career as a research scientist and is now entering the arena of public speaking as a science communicator. Dr. Luc Moens, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm pretty excited. Our true real-life scientist becoming a public speaker. Are you excited about that?
Yep, I am.
You are? All right. Well, okay, so after a 25-year-long career as a research scientist, you've decided to step out of the laboratory and come and be amongst the people.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, it's a long story, one that goes back to my time as an undergraduate student in Belgium, when I grew up with this image of Carl Sagan in front of me as being the grand scientific communicator. And aside from the fact that I was a chemist already at that time, I was enamored with the profession of a scientific communicator. And I have been refining it ever since, not only as a scientist in my daily practice as a speaker, but also because I was surrounded by people who wanted to know more about science. Friends, colleagues, small groups, and then ultimately it led me to Toastmasters, where I became a little bit more proficient in my presentation style. The end result was that I started to see the two worlds of the science inside the laboratory and then the science outside, and how people perceived science in outside society. And I became very concerned a few years ago about the dichotomy that is happening right now between people in the scientific world and what I call the information age, which in my opinion is becoming the misinformation age.
Sure.
And society is starting to look very down, I would say, on scientists and science as a process. And that misunderstanding started to concern me greatly. And that's why I decided to go into this profession of communicating about science and to be involved in the outside world to guide people towards science also.
All right, so you put together a keynote, and the subject is How the War on Science Threatens Us All, which is a pretty negative, it's a pretty dark title. So what exactly are you referring to when you say, I mean, is this the dichotomy, the split, the difference? Is that the war?
Yeah, correct. It is my concern that we are not taking care of this planet the way we should. We have environmental problems, we have health problems, we have nutritional problems for a growing population around the world. And my great concern right now is that our society does not cherish science and technology the way it should. It's ironic because people outside the scientific laboratories are the taxpayers. They provide the money, the funding for the scientific endeavors in the laboratories. And yet they don't seem to fully understand what people are doing behind the doors and the walls of the laboratories.
Sure.
And that is unfortunate because it will ultimately destroy the whole process of scientific endeavor. And especially here in the United States, where I consider to be the scientific world to be the mecca of all scientific endeavors, the leadership in the world that we have to set for us. That is really important to me, and I'd like to maintain that. That's why I'm talking about this societal war, this propaganda war against science that I see is very pernicious in many cases.
So there's a risk then going on, because we don't know what's going on behind the doors, like what's going on in the labs. How do we get that information, or how do we become more informed so we're not at risk?
Well, we do have now this so-called information age. We have Google. And many people unfortunately call themselves experts because they got a degree from Google University.
Right, yes.
Well, that's okay. You can work with a lot of information and somehow you'll get to the truth, but there are ways of using information in very good ways and in bad ways. And unfortunately, I see that people are not always asking the right questions. It's like Facebook. You see someone make a comment about a scientific issue, and all of a sudden you have 10 people jumping on it in a very negative way without really having the training. I'd like to have people become more part of the thinking behind science, to learn about science, to approach scientists, and it needs to go both ways. I'll admit that scientists are not exactly communicators. I'd like to see this connection between the two worlds of people inside the laboratory and outside, and I see some very good progress where the scientists are finally starting to realize, including myself, that we need to go outside the walls of the laboratory and communicate with people more and help them understand the issues by asking the right questions.
It's a skill set for you to actually also be a great communicator and also a scientist. How is it that you are so well spoken and well versed when you had all this background just being in a laboratory?
Well, thank you. This was the result, like I mentioned earlier. The Toastmasters training has done many things for me. I am very excited about the professional angles that one can cultivate in that organization. But there's also the many years of training in front of international audiences.
Okay.
I have done many good things in front of audience. I have made mistakes where later on I started to realize I need to start talking, communicating with people. Presenting technical information is one thing, but communicating it is another.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's one of the things that communicators like scientists do not always do outside the laboratories or outside their conferences. And so I had to learn this skill of talking to the lay people, the lay audiences, and that's what I'm engaging in right now on a larger scale as a personal venture, my second phase in life, if you will, to really endeavor in that environment of real world.
And you've taken on some pretty controversial subjects. I mean, you're not just tiptoeing into this. You talk about genetically modified foods, vaccinations with children, even the climate change development. Why hitting on all those really hot topics?
Yeah, sometimes I ask myself the same question. It's certainly not an easy target. Well, let's put it very bluntly. We have only one planet to live on, and we have some very serious challenges to overcome as a human race. I am very concerned about the track we're on, and it's not about the wars that we're fighting right now with military means. It's also the wars that we are fighting against propaganda. I am concerned about people not vaccinating their children anymore. Kids are dying. We have people not getting enough nutrition. People are becoming very ill-informed about the new technologies that we're trying to develop in order to help a growing population. And so the environment, nutrition, and health, those are the big topics, and everyone talks about those today as being the big drivers in science and technology development.
Right, and when I look on social media, everybody has an opinion, an uneducated opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're looking at celebrities or just an influencer in the community and following their lead. Now, there are a lot of things that these days that we need to get behind, right? And there's war issues, there's terrorism, I mean, there's a lot of awful things. How do we get people to be excited about the stuff that's going on in the science world?
Well, the science, as it has always done, has provided solutions to the problems. And I would even venture to say that many of the military problems that we have around the world right now are caused by populations that are stressed. Stressed in terms of environment, stressed in terms of nutrition and health. And this tension will not go away unless we tackle some of the bigger challenges.
I love it. I love it. So, what gives you the greatest joy?
The greatest joy for me has been training young people, making them excited about science and technology. Being a scientist and engineer in my own training, I have been able to relate to many of them. I have trained several interns. They have now become very successful, not only students, but professionals. And I hope that they will spread the message of more children getting into the STEM programs, which is really the thing that I would like to see more of. But it's also the connection with people outside the laboratories, the lay audiences, and see their lights go on when they finally understand the issues more clearly, when they get that aha moment. And that, to me, gives me a joy that is indescribable.
I can see it. Your whole body language, your whole body shifted when we started talking about that. All right, that was Dr. Luc Moens. His keynote is How the War on Science Threatens Us All. Dr. Luc Moens, thank you so much.
Pleasure.